A shape, G chord, pentatonic, and major scale position 5, or A shape, G position. Get ready because we're about to rock and or roll. Here we are in our worksheet, remembering that we have the top string on top, that being the low or heavy E, string closest to the ceiling, the high E on the bottom, the skinny string, one closest to the floor, 0 representing the open fret, the one that, if indicated, we would not be putting our finger down on, but ringing it out as open. Frets 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, the ones that we would be putting our finger down on if indicated in this case by the orange items. We're going to be focusing over here. We're looking at the A shape in a G position. It does wrap around because we're at the 12th fret, so it does wrap around here into the open area, and you can see that as part of basically a G chord over here. But our focus is out here on the 10th to 12th with our A position in the G. So we're going to go back up top, G chord, and just recap. In the open position, you'll recall that the A will look something like this. We're going to be just putting our fingers down on these 3 notes. We have many different ways we could do that. 3 fingers, the pinky, the ring, the middle finger, or just one finger, possibly the index finger, these 2 ringing out open, noting that this A is usually what we want to see as the home base, telling us that this is an A chord, and that will tell us that this shape, this A shape, as we hear it, A shape, the thing we don't often say, but we want to keep in our mind, A shape in the open position, so that if we move this shape up, such as moving it up here, we can see that we now have the A shape when in the open position. That's now a B chord. And even if you're just fingering this over here with just like one finger, with like your index finger, or with your 3 fingers, your pinky, your middle, and your ring, then you still want to be able to reference back to this note, noting that that's the note that's going to tell you, the one that's on the A string, the one second down from the top, the second lowest string's gonna tell you what the chord is that you're playing. Oftentimes you will be playing, however, a bar chord, and you do want to learn how to reposition your fingers with this one, putting your pointer finger here, and most likely your ring finger here, but some people might use their pinky over here for that bar chord, quite common and useful, that can then be moved up, and you can see how nicely it can be moved up, and you have a nice, pretty full bar chord that you can move up from here to a C, to a D, and you got this movable shape to the E, to the F, and now we're out to the G. So that's going to be a useful tool to have. Obviously, you can also use it just to note where you are in the positioning of the fretboard. If someone is playing, say, an open, big open G, you know how the G's got a big open space taking all of the 6 strings, you could go over here and voice it out something differently over here, possibly just using these strings to voice it out differently, to play something different, or arpeggiate these items over it. You might voice it down here somewhere to get some different voicings of it. So you can basically use this shape to anchor yourself and arpeggiate in different locations. If we look at our theory, going from the key of G, if we went from G to G, had all the notes, mapped out our whole half thing, it would be the notes in the G scale would be G, skipping a whole note to A, whole note to B, half step, then I should say being saying steps here. So G, whole step to A, whole step to B, half step to C, whole step to D, whole step to E, whole step to F sharp. There's the sharp, and then the half step back home, resolving to the G. This is a very common progression on the guitar. You've only got that one sharp that's in there, so it's pretty close to like the C major or A minor. So that's going to be G, A, B, C, D, E, and then F sharp. And then we've got the G. We can name those from 1 through 7. And then if we were looking at just the G notes, we're looking at every other for the first 3, the 1, 3, 5. That's going to be the G, B, D. So if we go back on over, we're looking for the G, B, D. We got G's, we got D's, we got G, we got B, and then the D again. So you can arpeggiate if a song is in the key of G, which is quite common. You can arpeggiate in here, any kind of order. You can play the chord, for example, with just these strings, even though the G is not the lowest note, still a G chord because it has a G, B, and D in it, different voicing of it. And then you can also use it to anchor down your position. So now let's look at the pentatonic. I'm going to unhide some cells here, unhiding some cells, moving on over to the pentatonic. So now we have that same A shape in a G chord, and we're adding the pentatonic shape around it. So you could label this, we've basically been labeling this whole pentatonic structure as an A shape pentatonic. But when you say A shape, it means A shape in the open position. So this is your A shape pentatonic. So that's a little confusing because it's an A chord shape pentatonic, the chord having 3 notes, the pentatonic having 5 notes. But you can understand, most people will understand what you mean if they have this cage system in your mind, because you moved the shape of the A up to a G. So it's an A shape G chord, and therefore G pentatonic position. So it's an A shape pentatonic position in the key of G, which tells you that inside of the shape, you have the chord shape inside the pentatonic shape, and you're moving it up to where you're playing a G chord in the A shape, noting that your finger is here on the root to tell you that, and then you added the 2 other notes in your standard pentatonic shapes, and that's how you got to the pentatonic, allowing you to add those 2 other notes to basically voice the chord differently if you want to attempt having different variants on the chord, and or to arpeggiate along with the song. These would be the next kind of items that you can select, which would be the next safest. Then of course we can add all the notes in the major scale. So now we could call this an A shape major scale in G, right? It's the G major scale A shape, and that's going to tell you not only the notes in it, but it's trying to attempt to tell you where you are, where you're playing them, what 4 to 5 frets your fingers are covering on the fretboard. So we can call it, once again, it's an A shape, because here's our A shape. It's A shape in the chord of G. It's a G chord because I know my finger is here, and that it's also a G major scale, because now I'm going to expand my thought process to name the entire scale around it, the relative notes that are going to be within the shape that I'm going to call the major scale in kind of the A position. So that would be the added 3 notes here. So now again, if you can add those in your mind, you can see this chord shape in the middle, noting that the root is here, so I know it's a G, then adding the pentatonic, which is the next safest thing to do if you're going to be embellishing either chords or just playing along with the song as you're picking around with it. And then the next one would be to add the full chords or the full scale. So if we go back to our theory, then we have our notes that if we're in the key of G, quite common. You can name them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then if you were building a song, the progression would be the notes you can pick from would typically be the G major, the A minor, the B minor, the C major, the D major, the E minor, the F sharp minor, or this would be diminished, which oftentimes people drop off. Common progression would be the 1, 4, 5, which would be the majors, the G, the C, D, very common. And so if you're looking at that, then of course if you were playing and the thing was in the 1, 4, 5 in the key of G, then you could basically move up here if you so chose, and you could start to arpeggiate within there if you wanted to play along with the song, to add something new to the song. You can voice your chords a little bit differently, try voicings that are inside of this shape at least, as you do alternatives to the A shape possibly. You can then add the notes in the pentatonic scale, the next safest thing to do as you're picking around, and you can then add the other notes. You can also be moving this, if you're moving from the 1, 4, 5, the G, B, D, to other shapes. You can move this whole shape up, of course, to back to the B over here and the D, so that you could use basically that same shape to kind of chase the song around as the chord changes progress. Or you can do what would probably be best when you're starting out, at least try to stay home when you're picking around with it in the home note. If it was playing in the key of G, if it was a 1, 4, 5, trying to play along with it or add some stuff to it by staying in the key of G possibly.